Hello and welcome to the Aspect Music Academy YouTube channel. My name is Matt Tinkler. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer and founder of Aspect Music Academy, which is an online music education platform dedicated to helping you learn music production properly from the ground up. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through your very first steps with Ableton Live 12. So whether you're new to music production in general, you're new to the software, you just want to get your feet wet with Ableton Live, by the end of this video, you'll have a comprehensive understanding of the absolute fundamentals of the software and be able to use it to make music, export it, and share it with your friends. Before we get into it, I think it's important to talk about what Ableton Live actually is. Ableton Live is a digital audio workstation, or DAW, and it's a piece of software that allows you to work with, manipulate, and edit audio in order to make music. You can record audio, you can have it make sounds, you can play virtual instruments, and you can do absolutely everything you need in order to be able to make music on a computer using a software like Ableton Live. Now, Ableton Live 12 comes in 4 different editions. There's Ableton Live Lite, Intro, Standard, and Suite. These different editions have effectively the exact same core functionality. They just have different limitations in terms of what they have access to from things like audio effects, sounds, instruments, samples, etc. The only biggest thing to note is that Live Lite and Live Intro are limited in the number of different tracks or layers they can have in a single session. Live Lite is limited to 8 tracks, whereas Live Intro is limited to 16 tracks, and Standard and Suite allow you to have unlimited tracks across your live set. Now, Ableton Live Lite is the most basic version of the software, and it comes bundled with hardware and software purchases, things like audio interfaces, MIDI controllers, and some software subscriptions as well, or even one-off software purchases, things like Ableton Note, which is an app for iOS. Live Intro, Standard, and Suite are purchasable directly from ableton.com, and you can also find a comprehensive list of the differences between those different editions on the Ableton website. Now, if you don't already own a version of Ableton Live 12, the good news is that you can get a time-limited trial directly from ableton.com. To download the trial, all you need to do is head to ableton.com, come up to the top right where it says Try Live 12 for free, and then download the appropriate version for your operating system, follow the prompts to install it, sign in, and authorize your trial. It's also important to note that the trial is fully functional Ableton Live Suite, which is the most comprehensive version of the software. So you get access to try out absolutely everything that Ableton Live has to offer if you try out the trial. For this tutorial, it doesn't matter which edition of Ableton Live 12 you have access to. Even if you only have access to Ableton Live 12 Lite, you'll be able to follow along with absolutely everything. So let's get started. So when you first open up Ableton Live 12, you'll be met with a screen that looks very similar to this. To start with, we're just going to go through the different sections here that you'll see so that you can get a bit of an understanding of what's actually going on in the screen. To start with, up the very top of the window, you'll see a bunch of different controls. There's no official name for this section. I kind of like to call it the control bar because this is where you have access to a lot of different core functionality of the software. Things like setting back the playback tempo, things like setting a key, things like setting or playing around with the transport controls, play, stop, record, etc., looping controls, all the way through to even seeing information about how your audio interface or how your audio output and inputs are set up on the top right-hand side. We're not going to cover all of these controls in this tutorial, but we're definitely going to be using bits and pieces of it as we go. Next, we have the browser, which we can see on the far left of the screen. This is where we can access all of the different sounds, instruments, effects, etc., assets that we can use in order to make, manipulate, and edit music inside of Ableton Live. We can show or hide this particular view by just coming up to the top left and clicking on the little Show Hide Browser button, which allows us to show or hide the browser. You can also show or hide the browser by using the keyboard shortcut Command, Option, and B on Mac or Control-Alt-B on Windows. Next, we have the main view of Ableton Live here, which is actually a switchable view between 2 different views. The one you can see at the moment is called the Session View, and the Session View allows us to see all of our different tracks, which are these vertical columns right here, which you could think of as different layers of sound or music in our session, lined up left to right. This particular view also allows us to play back different layers and loop them in a non-linear fashion in a performative way, which is something that we'll look at in a little bit. This middle view also switches to something known as the arrangement view, which we can access by coming up to the top right and clicking on these 3 horizontal lines, which we can now see those same 4 tracks or different layers, this time just laid out vertically, so from top to bottom, as opposed to where they were laid out in session view from left to right. And here in the arrangement view, the main difference is that we get to see the contents of each track laid out from left to right on a timeline, more so how you might lay out some kind of a song, for instance. We can actually switch back and forth between these views by pressing the Tab key on our keyboard, which allows you to very quickly switch back and forth between the session and the arrangement view. We're going to stay in the session view for most of this tutorial, so open up the session view and then let's move on. Next, down the bottom, we have another switchable view. This is known as the device view. Currently, it says drop an instrument or sample here. And this view allows us to see all of the instruments, effects, etc. that are actually on whatever track we have selected in either our session or our arrangement view. And you'll notice that as I select this first track that says MIDI, down in our device view, it says drop an instrument or sample here. And if I select this third track that says audio, you'll notice it switches to saying drop audio effect here. And that's because these two different tracks work in two different ways, which is something we'll cover a little bit later on. But we can also switch this bottom view to what's known as the clip view by pressing either the Shift and Tab key on our keyboard, or by coming down to the very bottom and clicking on either the clip view or the device view buttons here. Now, currently, because we have no clip selected and we have no devices, this is a very bare section, but we'll see this in action a little bit later on. Lastly, what I think is one of the most important views for any beginner coming into Ableton Live is this bottom left view over here, which is known as the info view. And what the info view does is shows you a little bit of information about any parameter or control that you're hovering over inside of Ableton Live. For instance, as my mouse hovers over the info view, it's telling us what the info view actually is. As my mouse hovers over the device chain view, it's telling us what that view is. And if I hover over anything else, it will tell us what that particular control or even just section is in Ableton Live. We can show or hide the info view with either this bottom left eye icon or by pressing Shift and the question mark key on our keyboard. I recommend you leave the info view open as often as you can, particularly when you're starting out. Now, particularly if you're coming from a different digital audio workstation and you're looking into Ableton Live and you're already familiar with music production, Ableton Live might look a little bit different compared to other digital audio workstations that you might be familiar with. So I think it's important to get familiar with what the software looks like and these different sections before you actually go and get started making music. Speaking of, there's also one more thing I want to talk about before we actually get started, and that is the Preferences menu. So we can access the Preferences menu by coming up to the top, and if you're on Windows, you'll find this under the Options menu, or if you're on Mac, you can just click on Live and come to the Settings option. You can also access this menu with the keyboard shortcut Command or Control and comma on your keyboard. This will show up the Settings menu. Now, there's a lot of different things in the Settings menu that we're not going to cover today, but there are two main sections in the Settings menu I think are important to cover. The first is the Theme and Colors. Now, this section allows us to set the look and feel of the software. You'll notice by default, my software looks pretty dark. Yours might look fairly light, and we can change how the software actually looks by using these theme controls up the top. You'll see mine's currently set to default. We can change this to Angst Robot. We can change this to Classic Medium Light. We can change it to Riparian. I often prefer to work in Classic Medium Dark, but just change around whatever suits you. I'm going to leave it on Classic Medium Dark for the moment. Here we can also change things like the grid line intensity, the overall brightness of the view. And if we want to reset this, we can just simply double click on the number, change things like the color intensity, even the color hue, and this allows you to kind of customize the look and feel of the software. The next and last tab we want to look at in the settings menu is this audio tab. In order for us to actually hear anything coming out of the software and get any sound going into Ableton Live, we need to make sure that our audio devices and drivers are set up correctly. Now, mostly this will be done by default on whatever computer you're working with, but if for whatever reason you're not hearing sound coming out of the software, this is the first place to try. Now, I'm not going to go too into depth on what these different options are, but if you're on Mac, all you need to do is just make sure this driver type is set to core audio. It mostly will be. And if you're on Windows, I highly recommend setting this to ASIO if you can. Next, if you're doing any recording, if you have an audio interface or something set up with maybe with a microphone put into it, you need to make sure that that audio interface is selected in your audio input device drop-down menu. You can see I've got a lot of audio input devices here, but this is my audio interface, the Scarlett 18i8. And then you need to make sure you set your audio output device in order to actually be able to hear the sound coming out. This is also where you'd set maybe your external headphones, your computer's inbuilt speakers, or again, your audio interface if you're working with something like that. Beyond that, we don't need to touch anything else in this section, so let's close up our settings menu and get started making some music. So to start with, let's add a simple drum beat into our live set so that we can have some sound. In order to do this, we're going to go to our browser and come to the section on the left called Library. And you'll see under Library, there's a whole bunch of different categories that we can click through. I'm going to go to the drums category. And here in the drums category, we get to see a whole bunch of different preloaded drum kits that come installed in Ableton Live. Now, depending on what edition of Ableton Live you have, and maybe if you've got some packs installed, you might see more or less than what I've got here. You probably won't see more because I've got a lot, but you'll probably be able to see some different drum kits. And you'll see these different drum kits denoted by this tiny little curved rectangular icon here with these 6 squares in it. And in order to preview what one of these kits sounds like, all we need to do is just simply click on that kit. And we get a little bit of a preview of that sound. You can just stop the preview by clicking anywhere else in the session view, and that will stop the preview. So what we're going to do is audition a few kits and see if we can find one that we like. And I actually know the kit that I want to go for here, and I'm going to scroll up to find it. And this is going to be the 909 core kit. So I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top and find this 909 core kit. Then once I have that kit that I've found that I like, I'm just going to click and drag this onto this first MIDI track in our session view. When I let go, you'll notice that down the bottom, the device view actually starts to show us what we've now dragged in. We can see we've dragged in this 909 core kit instrument, and this is a drum rack instrument which is loaded up with a bunch of different samples that allows us to play back those samples to create some kind of a drum beat. Now at this point, I think it's important to just talk really briefly about what a MIDI track is versus what an audio track is. A MIDI track is a type of track inside of Ableton Live that is used to turn MIDI information or note input information into some kind of sound. MIDI tracks store MIDI information, kind of like sheet music, and then send that MIDI information to some kind of an instrument, which is generally located on the track. Maybe it's a drum instrument, maybe it's some kind of a bass or a keyboard instrument, and then that instrument generates the sound based on the incoming notes. This is different from something like an audio track, which instead of working with MIDI information like sheet music, these are the kinds of tracks where we record on or use pre-recorded audio sounds or audio recordings and be able to manipulate them, add effects, and play them back on the track. We'll use an audio track later on, but for now, let's click back to our MIDI track and take a look at our 909 core kit. Now, if you want, you're very welcome to click around on whatever kit you've dragged in here. You'll see there's some play buttons, which allow you to hear the sounds that are associated with each of those different pads on this drum rack, but we're going to go ahead and create our own drum beat. To do this, I'm going to go to the top rectangle on this track, which is known as a clip slot, and simply double click. What this is going to do is create a MIDI clip in that clip slot, which is 1 bar long. And so now you can see that our device view, or what was our device view, has switched to our clip view. And because we have this clip selected in our 909 core kit track, this is the clip we're looking at. We can switch back to our device view at any time with Shift and Tab, or in Ableton Live 12, you can actually view the device view and the clip view at the exact same time just by coming down to our chooser down the bottom, or our selector, and just clicking on the arrow for the view that you don't currently have selected. And so now we can see our clip view at the same time as our device view. If we don't want to see this, we can just simply hide one of the views and maybe go back and press Shift and Tab to go back to our clip view. And from here, we can input some MIDI information to tell that instrument what to play back. To start with, I'm going to go to this bass drum and I'm going to put a note on every single beat. If you're unfamiliar with bars and beats, don't worry about it too much at this particular stage. But in order to put a bass drum on each of these different beats, I'm just going to double click where it says 1, where it says 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. And now, in order to hear what we've actually input into this MIDI clip, I'm going to come up to the clip in our session view, and you can see we have this little play button on the left of it. I'm going to click this, and this is going to allow us to play back that MIDI clip and hear our drum pattern. And I can just stop that by pressing the spacebar on my keyboard, and I can play it again by pressing the spacebar again, or by pressing the play button. Let's go ahead and add in some more sounds here. Now, if I want to preview what these individual sounds sound like, I can just go up to the top left of this MIDI clip where we see this little headphone icon. This is our MIDI note editor preview. And now if I click on any of these black or white rectangles, these different notes, this will allow me to hear what that associated sound is. So let's go ahead and take this snare drum and input this on the second and the fourth beats of this bar, just by double clicking in these empty slots. Press the spacebar to hear what this sounds like. Awesome. Now the 2 and 4 here is what's known as the backbeat, and this is a very common, particularly dance music pattern where we have the bass drum or the kick drum on every single beat of the bar and the snare drum on the second and fourth beats or the backbeat of the bar. Let's take this one step further and input something like the closed hi-hat on every offbeat, which is this middle note in between each of these beats. And then for the sake of it, let's take something else, maybe like this mid-tom or this low tom, and put this in the last note or this last space in our bar. Play this back to hear what it sounds like. And stop it again with the spacebar. Now, if we want to play this back at a different speed, all we need to do is adjust the tempo of our live set. To do this, we can come up to our control bar up the top left, and right next to where it says tap, we can see a number that will probably say 120. This is our tempo, or our beats per minute, which is the value in music that is basically how fast the music is playing back. I can change the tempo or the playback speed of my session just by clicking and dragging up or down on this tempo, and that will change how fast this drum beat plays back. And we can just double click this to reset it to 120. So set this tempo to whatever you like. I'm going to leave it on 120, but you go ahead and set it to whatever you want. It's also important to note that you're not locked into the tempo you set. You can change this at absolutely any time. So feel free to start at one tempo and then change it to a different tempo later on down the line. So now I'm listening back to this drum beat and I'm hearing that these hi-hats are a little bit too loud. So what I can do in order to turn these down is adjust the velocity of the hi-hat notes. To do this, I can just select, click and drag to select each of these closed hi-hats, and then come down to this bottom area, which is our velocity section. And if I just click and drag down on one of these horizontal lines, I can turn down the velocity or up the velocity of each of my selected notes. And what the velocity, generally speaking, does is turns either up or down the volume of that note. So now by turning down the velocity of the closed hi-hats, we've effectively turned down the level of these hi-hats. And if I want to adjust the velocity of these notes independently, I could change the velocity of this closed hi-hat, simply click and drag this up, and maybe the last closed hi-hat as well. And I could even change the velocity of this last low tom, just click on this and click and drag down the velocity. Now, what's important to note here is that this MIDI clip is actually just a piece of information. It's almost like a piece of sheet music that you would give to a drummer or a piano player or an instrumentalist and tell them what to play back, but it doesn't determine what the instrument actually is. And so why this is nice is because it actually allows us to change out the sounds that we are using to play back this MIDI clip. If I press the Shift and Tab key to go back to our device view, I can change this 909 core kit for a different drum kit. So I could go back to my browser, find a different kit, and if I liked this kit, I could just click and drag this from the browser over the top of the 909 core kit. And now we have that same MIDI clip playing back with a completely different sound. Let's undo that for now with Control or Command and Z on our keyboard to go back to our 909 kit because I liked that, but it's really important to note that you can swap this kit out at any point in time. So now that we have a little 1-bar drum pattern, let's go ahead and add in another sound, and let's use a bass for this. So to find a bass sound, all I'm going to do is come to my library section once again, and instead of going to drums, I'm just going to go to sounds. And here I can see all of the different pitched instruments that Ableton Live has installed. Much like I could see all of the different percussive or drum instruments that Ableton Live has in the drums section, I can see all of the pitched instruments and sounds in the sound section. And again, you can see there's a lot of them. So what I want to do here is actually filter by bass sound. And in order to do this, I can come up to the top section, which are the filters in the browser. If you don't see this section, all you need to do is click on this little filter icon to make sure you can see it. And then we want to make sure that we have our sounds unfolded. And all we need to do is just click on bass. And here, Now, every single sound that I'm seeing show up in my browser is going to be tagged as a bass sound. And now if I want to hear a preview of that sound, once again, all I need to do is click on it. So let's go ahead and maybe grab this 808 pure sound. I'm just going to click and drag this onto my second MIDI track. And so now I have a second track which has this 808 pure instrument on it, and I want to be able to hear what it actually sounds like when I play it back. I can do this in a few different ways. If you have something like a MIDI keyboard that's already plugged into your computer, generally speaking, if you just start playing notes on that MIDI keyboard, you'll be able to hear that sound back. But if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, what you can do is turn your computer keyboard into effectively a piano keyboard that will allow you to play back this instrument. To do this, what I'm going to do is come up to the top right in our control bar and click on this little keyboard icon, which is the computer MIDI keyboard icon. We can also turn this on or off with the M key on our keyboard. Turning this on will effectively turn the middle row of keys on your computer keyboard into the white notes of a piano keyboard. And now with our computer MIDI keyboard turned on, the next thing we need to do is make sure that the track itself is armed for recording. To make sure this is the case, we're just going to come down to the bottom of the track or this vertical column in our session view and make sure that we have this arm recording button clicked and turned on. It needs to be red. Now all we need to do is just press any key on our middle row of keys on our keyboard, and that will play back that sound with that note. I can pull this down one octave with the Z key. Let's pull it down another octave. And now we're playing back the bass sound. So if we wanted to input a MIDI clip for this bass sound, we could do exactly the same thing and just double click on a clip slot and input the notes manually, or we could actually record in something by playing in something on our computer keyboard whilst our drum kit is playing. So let's do that now. To start recording a MIDI clip on this track, all I need to do is just click on this little circle button on the left of this clip slot. This will only appear if the track is armed, so you do need to make sure the track is armed. And when I click on that, Ableton Live is going to start recording, and it will record in any note that I then play. So let's play back some kind of a pattern whilst this is recording. And then once I'm done, I'm just going to press the space bar to stop the recording. Now, if we want to see the notes that we played back, we can just double click on the MIDI clip and we can see the notes that we actually played and recorded in. We can scroll down using our scroll wheel. And if we want to zoom in and out and move around in the MIDI clip, we can move our cursor all the way up to above this bar to where it turns into this magnifying glass, and just click and drag up and down to zoom in or out, and left and right to scroll left and right. And each of these green rectangles are the different notes, and you can see they're associated with different notes of our piano keyboard. And if I want to hear this played back, all I need to do is just press the space bar again. And it will play back. But notice there were two different things that happened. First is that each of the different notes aren't really that in time with the drum beat. And that's because I didn't play them in very well. I didn't record them in very well. And so in order to fix this, I can actually quantize each of these different MIDI notes so that they play back right on the grid. Let's zoom out. And to do this, I'm just going to click and drag to select all of these MIDI notes, right click anywhere in the MIDI clip, and then come to either quantize or quantize settings. For this, I'm going to click on quantize settings, and that will show up a little quantize option in the left menu in the clip. Now, if this clip view looks slightly different, it may be because it's collapsed, in which case it might look something like this. If this is the case and you want it to look different, all you need to do is just move your cursor over to the right-hand side of this section and just click and drag to the right to open it up. So now with all these different notes selected, and with our quantize settings available in our MIDI clip options, we need to select some quantize options. For this, I'm just going to select the 16th note option and then click the transform option. And then once I've done that, you'll see that all of our notes are now actually playing back smack bang on the grid. Now, if we wanted to adjust any of these different notes, we could also just click and drag to move them around. For instance, maybe I didn't want this second note to be this note. I wanted it to be a different note. I could just click and drag to move it up to play a different pitch. And if I wanted to input a new note, all I'd need to do is again, just find an empty slot and just double click to input that note. If I wanted to delete a note, all I need to do is just select the note that I want to delete and just press the backspace or delete key on my keyboard, and that will delete that note. And so let's do this a little bit. Let's move around some of these notes. Let's maybe add in a new one. And we can adjust the length of some of these notes as well, just by moving our cursor to the right-hand side of the note and clicking and dragging to the left or right. We can also zoom in so we can see these notes a little bit better if we move our cursor all the way to the left till it turns into this magnifying glass icon, and zoom in that way and just scroll down so we can see the notes a little bit easier. And so now we've got a little bit of a different MIDI clip playing back this bass sound. Now, the next issue with this is that if we zoom out, we actually have a 6-bar long clip and our bass doesn't start playing until bar 2. Now, this isn't inherently a bad thing, but I actually want this to be a 4-bar long clip instead, where the bass starts right on the first beat. And the way that Ableton Live works is that our different MIDI clips actually have their own independent lengths. And so our drum loop is only 1 bar long, whereas this is currently 6 bars long. In order to change the length and the selection of the loop of our bass clip, I'm going to come up to this top loop brace, which is currently in this light green color, move my cursor all the way to the left of it until it turns into a square bracket, click and drag this until it matches with the start of my first note, and then go up to the top right, and then click and drag this back. So now we have a 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, 4 bar long MIDI clip. And when we play this back, we're going to start right on this first note, and then it's going to loop around perfectly back to the beginning. So now that we've got 2 different sounds going on here in our set, I think it's a good time to take a look at the track controls. So let's press Shift and Tab to close up our MIDI clip and switch it back to the device view, and then take a look back at our session view. And here, what we're going to do is take a look right down the bottom of each of these columns where we can see these track meters, these knobs, these numbers, and these other buttons. And what these are our track controls that allow us to change things about how that actual track plays back. Things like its volume, whether or not it's muted, or if it's soloed, or maybe panned to the left or the right. In this particular instance, I think the bass is a little bit too loud. So what I'm going to do is come to the bass track, and then with this control right here, this track volume control, I can just click and drag this to turn it down. If I want to mute the bass, I can just click on this track activator icon, and that will stop the bass from playing back. Or if I want to solo the bass, I can press on this solo icon, and that will just solo the bass, and I can unsolo it like that. Now, if you had some other sounds and you wanted one to play back further in the left speaker or in the right speaker, you could play around with the track pan controls, which allow you to pan the sound from left to right. To demonstrate this, I can just show you on the drum kit, but I'd recommend leaving this just set to the center. And as a side note, if you want to reset any control like the pan or the track volume at any point in time, you can just double click on that control and that will reset it to its default value. So now that we've got the bass to a good volume relative to the drums, let's take a look at changing a little bit of the sound of the bass. And if we come down to our device view, we can see there are a few controls on this 808 Pure instrument. Now, I'm not going to go into depth on what each of these controls do because all these controls will also be different depending on the instrument that you've got loaded up there, but let's just play around with some of these controls and take a listen to what it does to the sound. And of course, you can replace this sound with whatever sound you like from the sounds section in the browser at any time. But for now, just set those settings to whatever you like and let's move on. By the way, if you want to dive deeper and learn music production properly from the ground up, then check out Aspect Music Academy. We have a growing collection of fully self-paced online courses, such as the Create Your Own Music in Ableton Live course, which goes through absolutely everything you need to know about creating your own music in Ableton Live, monthly masterclasses and a vault of previous recordings, an awesome community, discounts, and more. It's $29 a month. You can cancel anytime, and you can check out the link in the description to learn more. So now I've got a bit of a pattern that I've liked, played around with MIDI clips. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we can use an audio track to add in some more interest. And for this, I'm going to use an audio loop, which is basically something that's been pre-recorded so that it loops really nicely and will work really well as a layer in what we're working on. To find a loop, all I'm going to do is come down to our Places section in the browser, click on where it says Packs. And here, I've got a bunch of different packs that I have installed, but depending on your edition of Ableton Live, you might have more or less. You can also download any packs that you have available to download depending on your edition from here as well. But what I'm going to do is just come to the core library pack, which you should see in the browser. Click on this, and then I'm going to come down to where it says Samples, Loops, and I'm going to find a drum loop. So here we've got drums. I might find a percussion loop. And here, if I scroll through my percussion loops, I'm going to hear what they sound like. And so you'll notice that these percussion loops all have this little symbol on the left of them that kind of looks like a little bit of a square with an audio waveform and a tick next to them. Don't worry too much about what that tick means, but this just basically shows that these are audio files, and the fact they also have .aif or .wav at the end of them means they're audio files as well. And audio files can only be loaded onto audio tracks. Luckily, we already have 2 of these audio tracks in our set, but if for whatever reason you don't have any audio tracks here or you've gotten rid of them, you can always add in a new audio track just by simply right-clicking on where it says Drop Files and Devices here, and just click on Insert Audio Track, or using the keyboard command, which is Command or Control and T. And now I've inserted a new audio track, and if we want, we can delete these other 2 audio tracks just by selecting them, pressing the Delete or the Backspace key on our keyboard, and here we're left with just our 3rd audio track. So let's go ahead and find a loop that we like. And if we want, we can actually play back what we've already made at the same time as auditioning these loops to see what we like. I actually like that Agogo Bells one, so I'm going to click and drag this into the first clip slot on this audio track number 3. And now if we double click on this, we can now see the audio clip. And what this is showing us is slightly different to our MIDI clip, because this is the waveform of the audio file that we can now see. Instead of if we clicked on one of these MIDI clips, we can see the notes that are being played. So let's go back to that audio clip. And now to play this back with our track, all we need to do is just click on the play button. Now, I'm not going to go into depth on audio clips in this video, that's a whole other thing, but for now, what I'm going to do is just press Shift and Tab to close up our clip view and just use the track volume control to turn down these bells a little bit. And press the spacebar to stop the playback. But in order to change the sound of these Agogo Bells a little bit, what I can do is add an audio effect. Now, an audio effect is basically a module that takes in an audio signal and then processes it in some way, shape, or form, and then outputs that processed version. Some good examples are things like delay, reverb, EQ, compression, and distortion. For these Agogo Bells, I want to try adding a delay. So to find this, I'm going to come over to the browser section, and where it says library, I can come down to audio effects. And here I can see all of the audio effects that I have installed inside of Ableton Live. And these are all the audio effects that come with Ableton Live. These aren't any third-party audio effects if you've downloaded any VSTs or something like that. So to find my delay, I can just scroll up and search for delay. Or if you want to filter by a specific type of effect, you can go up to the filters section and search by devices. So I could search for delay, and I can see there are a few different delay options here, but we're just going to stick with the normal delay audio effect. Now you notice when I click on this, there's no audio preview because this is an audio effect and not something that actually produces sound in and of itself. To add this to the Agogo Bells track, all I need to do is just click and drag this either onto the Agogo Bells track itself, or making sure the Agogo Bells track is selected, I can just click and drag this down directly into our device view where it says drop audio effects here. And now we'll see that we have a delay loaded up onto this Agogo Bells track. And if I press play, we can hear that Agogo Bells now has a little bit of a delay effect on top of it. Now in this instance, I don't really like the particular sound of this delay too much. So instead of adjusting any of these parameters, I'm going to find a delay preset that I like. To do this and to swap out this delay unit here for a delay preset, I can just click on this little recycle or hot swap button at the top of the delay, and you'll see that the browser now opens up underneath this delay with a whole bunch of different presets of the delay. Now, all of these are the exact same delay device, just with different preset positions for each of the parameters and controls of that device. So in order to hot swap this, all I need to do is just double click. Maybe let's click on this 16th notes dub and then press play. Maybe click on 8th note. I really like that one. And so to stop hot swapping, I can just come up to where it says swapping audio effect and click on this little X button to turn off the hot swap for the delay. To add in a little bit more interest, let's add an audio effect to our 909 core kit as well. So let's come to the 909 core kit track and let's search for some kind of distortion or saturation. So I'm going to go to the filter. Let's click on distortion. And here I'm going to use Ableton Live's saturator device. Now, instead of adding the saturator and then finding a preset, we can actually find a preset from saturator just by clicking on the arrow to the left of it, scrolling down, and let's find this a bit warmer preset. Now, when adding an audio effect to a MIDI track, the audio effect needs to go after the instrument. To do this, we can either just, again, click and drag onto the track directly. That will automatically put it after the instrument on the track, or we can just click and drag down into our device view and just let go where it says drop audio effects here. And that will add this a bit warmer preset. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like. Let's solo our drums. And now with our drums soloed, we can actually activate and deactivate this a bit warmer saturator audio effect just with the device activator button in the top left. So we can hear what it sounds like with the effect and without the effect. Let's turn it back on and maybe hot swap this for a different effect or a different preset. Maybe we can go to this basic soft one instead. I like what that sounds like, so let's stop hot swapping the audio effect, unsolo our drums track, and hear everything together. So now I've got 3 different clips inside of our Ableton Live set, all playing back different things, and together they sound pretty cool. What we can actually do in the session view is create a little bit of a performance with these 3 clips. We can bring them in and out at different times and create some kind of a track with these 3 different sounds. Now you'll notice that with these 3 clips, on the left of them, that play button is actually turned green. But we're not actually hearing any of these clips playing at the moment, and that's because in the session view, the clip play buttons are separate from Ableton Live's global playback. We aren't hearing these at the moment because we're not actually playing back Ableton Live globally. To start Ableton Live's playback engine, all you need to do is press the spacebar on your keyboard or press the play button up the top, and that's what we've been doing this whole time. But because all 3 of these clips are playing, what's happening when I'm starting the playback is all 3 of those clips are playing. But if I want to stop the playback of any of these clips, what I can do is just come down to the middle of that track in our session view where we can see this kind of middle bar and just press on the stop clip button right here. That will stop the Go-Go Bells clip from playing, and you can see it's no longer got a green play button. And so now when I play back my Ableton Live set, we're not going to hear those Go-Go Bells. So let's stop all of these clips. And now in order to actually start playing back both our playback and one of these clips, all I need to do is just click on the play button on any one of these clips. So we could start with the 909 core kit. And then in order to bring in other clips or stop the playback, we can either click on the playback button to start the playback of that clip, or just the stop clip button on any of these tracks to stop the playback of the clip on that track to create a little bit of a performance. And now I've stopped all the clips, but we can see that Ableton Live's playback is still running. So in order to stop that, I'm just going to press the space bar on my keyboard And so now when we play back any of these clips, we're going to hear that playback start right away. And so why this is cool is it allows us to play back these clips in a non-linear fashion, in a performative way, to kind of try out different combinations of different clips and create some kind of an arrangement on the fly. And the extra cool thing is that we can actually record our performance into the arrangement view, which we can access with the tab key so that we can see it on a timeline. And so to do this, I'm just going to go back to our session view, and then to start recording my performance, all I need to do is just come up to the global transport controls and click on this record button. Now, depending on your settings, clicking this record button might start recording and playback automatically, or you might have to start the playback manually by either pressing play on one of these clips or the play button. In the case of my settings, I'm going to click on the record button and then start playback just by pressing the play button on one of these clips and then record a short little performance. Let's start with the drums. Bring in the bass. Bring in the bells. Stop the bass. Stop the drums, stop the bells, and just press the spacebar to stop the playback. And so now if I press the tab key, I can see that recording that I made has actually been transferred into our arrangement view. But there's just one problem. As we can see, this whole arrangement view, our timeline, looks like it's grayed out. And that's because in Ableton Live, we can only have one clip playing at any given time per track, and that clip can only either be from session view or arrangement view. Remember, these tracks, these different layers, are the same tracks that exist in session view with these clips that we had on them, and these are the exact same tracks here in the arrangement view. But because we last played back clips from session view on each of these tracks, the session view is actually what's taken over the clip playing on each of these tracks. And so if I press the spacebar now to start playing back, we don't actually hear anything, even though we can see this playhead is moving across these clips in our arrangement view timeline. To get these clips to play back, we need to go back to arrangement, and we can do this by coming up to the top right of our arrangement view timeline, where we can see this orange icon, this play with these three horizontal lines. Click on this, and now none of those tracks are grayed out anymore. And if I press the spacebar or the play button, we can hear all of these clips playing back and hear our performance played back in its entirety. Awesome. So now let's take a quick look at the arrangement view. We can navigate the arrangement view in a very similar way to how we navigated our MIDI clips. If we want to zoom in, we can just move our cursor up to the top where we have these numbers of bars, and our cursor turns into this magnifying glass icon. Click and drag up and down to zoom in or out, and left and right to scroll left or right. As a side note, if you're using a trackpad, you can also swipe with two fingers, left and right, zoom in or out the normal way. And if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can hold down the scroll wheel, your cursor will turn into a hand icon, and you can click and drag left and right to scrub left and right. Or if you want to zoom in or out, you can hold down the Command key on Mac, and I believe it's the Control key on Windows, to zoom in or out while scrolling up and down. I find that a much easier way to navigate than using the cursor magnifying glass up the top. And so now that we're in our arrangement view, we can actually edit our arrangement on the timeline by clicking and dragging and moving these clips around, adjusting their start positions, maybe deleting some of them, and create an arrangement of these three clips. So for instance, maybe I actually want this bass to start a little bit earlier, all the way at bar 1. To do this, I can just come to the bass clip itself, move my cursor up to this very top bit of it, this top bar where it turns into this hand icon, and just click and drag this around. And now I can move this bass clip to the left and the right. And you'll notice that when I did that, any other clips that were on that track, when I let go of this clip, actually got deleted. So just be careful with that. But I'm going to click and drag this back to bar number 1. So it starts right at the beginning. And then I'm going to do the same with the agogo bells. Just bring these back so they start at bar 3 instead. And then potentially I want these drums to stop playing at bar 5, but then come back in at bar 9. So what I can do is just trim this drum clip, move my cursor up to the top right until it turns into this square bracket. And this allows me to just shorten or lengthen the clip. We can have this stop at bar 5. And then if I want to maybe copy this so it moves over to bar 9, I can just click on the clip, press Command or Control and C, or right click and come to copy, and then click on this 909 Core Kit track to where I want to paste it, right click and click on paste. And that will paste that clip there. And so now we have this gap of 4 bars in between the first time this clip plays and the second time the clip plays. You can also simply delete sections of clips as well. For instance, maybe I want to delete this middle section of the Agogo bells here. I can just click and drag to select that area and just press the delete or backspace key on my keyboard. Lastly, it's important to note we can actually go in and say edit these MIDI clips inside of the arrangement view instead of having to go back to the session view to edit them. So for instance, if I wanted to potentially edit this 909 Core Kit for the first 2 bars that it plays and remove the hi-hat, I could do just that. So to do this, I could select the first 2 bars, click and drag to select the first 2 bars of this 909 Core Kit clip, just right click and come down to where it says split. And what this will do is split out that selection so that this first 2 bars is different from this second 2 bars. And then I can double click on this first clip to open up the MIDI clip there and select these hi-hats and just press the delete key or backspace key on my keyboard to remove them from that clip, but not remove them from the next clip. Press Shift and Tab to go back to our device view. And now I've created a little bit of an arrangement. And so now you've got something that you like. There's 2 important things to do. First is to save it, and next is to export it. So to save your project, all we need to do is come up to File up the top and come down to Save Live Set. From here, this will open up a dialog box, which will allow you to choose where you want to save your live set to. I'm just going to save this to my desktop, and I'm just going to call this my first track. Come down to click Save, and that will save your project. And then in order to actually export what we've made as a listenable audio file, all I need to do is just select the range of time in my timeline that I want to export. That's going to be this first 12 bars. Come up to the File menu and come down to Export Audio/Video. Now don't worry too much about the details in this section. The main thing is that you want to make sure the rendered track here says main, this render start and render length match the selection on your timeline. You want to make sure that encode PCM is turned on. And if you want a shareable MP3 file, which is a smaller file size audio file, you can encode MP3 as well. Then click on export and find the location where you want to export to. For instance, I might want to export to that project folder that I created earlier by saving it. I can do this by coming to my desktop, finding that my first track project, and then save this as something like my first track -export. Click on save. That will export the audio. And now if I navigate to that location in my computer, I can find the audio file, listen back to it, and even share it around if I want to. And there you have it. By now, if you followed along, you should have created your very first track or beat inside of Ableton Live and have a relatively comprehensive understanding of the fundamentals of the software. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click on the like button, subscribe if you want to see more Ableton Live and music production content, and if you want to dive deeper and learn music production properly from the ground up, then head to aspectmusicacademy.com and join the academy. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Matt Tinkler, founder of Aspect Music Academy and Ableton Certified Trainer, and I will catch you in the next video.